Well, welcome to Book Sandwiched In without the sandwiches. Today, Juan Jones will be reviewing You Have More Influence Than You Think. How We Underestimate Our Power of Persuasion and Why It Matters by Vanessa Bohns, who's a professor at Cornell. Juan is a self-described bookworm. He's always been an advocate of the Steele Memorial Library and was a member of the Chemung County Library District Board of Directors. He has worked for 15 years in the field of higher education. So I'd like to present.
All right, thank you for everyone for coming, actually. So it's very nice. I want to say thank you for the, of course, Steele Memorial Library, Chemung County Library District, and also the Friends of the CCLD for putting this on. So also I want to thank, too, is other members of CCLD, past and present, to the Friends as well, including the youngest one we have up front as well for putting all that time, Miss Lennon. Thank you very much for all the work you have done, especially with Book Sandwiched In. And even the present members, Diane and then Barbara as well, and the rest of the team. So what I have here is you have more influence than you think. How we underestimate our power of persuasion and why it matters. So I decided to kind of bring that to here because not only that the book itself about persuasion, but also even the author as well. So me, I'm more like a curious kid. Have you ever seen the commercial where probably back in the 80s, 90s, it was a little kid, it was Tootsie Roll commercial, Mr. Owl, does anyone remember that? Like, how many licks does it take to get to the bottom of the, center of the Tootsie Roll? And I was kind of like that, and then I'll go, and one person, no, okay. Door closes or opens, go to another one and ask. And I always like that endless pursuit of kind of education and learning things. So, and one here is more social psychology. And Vanessa Bohns, she's a professor at Cornell University. And also she's well known in that field of research and especially, influence. So as you can see, I will not read all of this, but she's been really made the rounds. And one area that really stood out too is when I first connected with her work, you notice, does anyone listen to NPR? NPR? Okay, all right. I know I'm debating on getting an NPR tattoo. No, but even NPR's Hidden Brain, and that's where I heard her out. And me being the curious person that I am, like, Mr. Owl, what do I do? So after hearing actually her work there, I even sent her an email. So, and surprisingly, she responded. So, and I started doing that with different authors and things, and learning more what books they would recommend. So it's been really nice seeing that even prior to publishing. And now she published her book, and I'm just really happy to celebrate. Cornell University, a local person from the local area, really stands out nationally as well. So it really makes it nice. So why was it chosen? Kind of summarize a little bit already what we did in that part, which mentioned Hidden Brain, the podcast they had. There's multiple episodes you could always listen to online as well, if you like that. And that's what really kind of caused me to segue there. And also there's another part where it deals with influence, is usually myself. Quite a few people end up mentioning that I undersell myself. My work, what I do, and I assume, oh, everyone's like that. Everyone likes to do presentations about books. Everyone likes to, be on the board of directors of a library. Or everyone enjoys, which I do, lobby day for libraries in February. I think the coolest thing is going in the bus and meeting with other people there. And while you're going all the way to the Capitol to speak to the senators, to speak to the assembly people. I don't know, it's just really fun and cool for me. So, but I realized I started to be an oddity when I first started volunteering when I was 14 here. People say, you don't get paid? Why do you do it? It feels good. And I get to learn. I would leave with so many books. So that's another reason. And that's why I kind of chose this subject, just the interest in this field. So a little overview too. It's really for people, this book really kind of pushes across to recognize the influence that we do have. Whether you're working, average person working in the field, or even if you're person in power. There's some things to think about because some people in power, they have influence more, they don't realize the power that they actually have and how it affects other people. So then I kind of throw some personal examples, and feel free even later on if people have some, time-based, people have something to share, you could do some as well. After this, you may recognize the influence that you have or exerted in your life. So, first impressions. Just one thing to think about. Our first impressions, a lot of times we have that self-doubt. Has anyone had self-doubt? You're doing something, you're thinking, oh gosh, presentation's not going well. Oh, why is my DNA like this? I sweat so much. I used to do that even when I volunteered in a kindergarten class, and he said, Mr. Jones, yes? Why are you raining? I thought, well, I never would have thought of that perspective. It's me. It's part of me. So be it. Or the other part, you're just thinking, oh, didn't get my hair cut. Did I get this? Did I do that? But we're worrying about that, so we tend to be ourselves worst critics. So one thing to always think about is that first impression, when you meet people or connect, it's actually better than you think. Okay? Always kind of keep that part in mind. Another area too, ask. We tend to kind of assume that the results of our ask, it's not going to be as great. It's not going to be as well. But it tends to be better than what we always assumed. So we'll talk a little bit about that even later on too as well. For example, the Pickle Experiment. I know it's like blasphemy in a library, okay? Because it deals with writing pickle in a library book. I feel like that deals with group all or something. Ooh. But, so they actually did a study here in that field that they actually had the subjects ask people if they would write in a book, in a library. But something to keep in mind, I will say, no library books were harmed, okay? They actually had to purchase the book, it was separate from the actual library book, so they weren't actually vandalizing, okay? But it was as a test. And the actual experimenters, or the participants in it, who were asking people, they thought maybe 28% that would probably actually write pickle in the book. And actually, it turns out 64% actually did. So you think about the influence one actually has just by asking, and that's asking to do something that ethically some people may be uncomfortable. They may do, or they may be still uncomfortable, and they may still do it. So always beware of your influence, okay? So on this end, especially I always want to make clear when we talk about influence too as well, this is not a book to really, it's not teaching people to be unethical, but to be knowledgeable of the volume of power you do have, to use it for good, not for evil. It's also another part too when we say about saying yes versus saying no. A lot of times, or it's actually harder for people to say no than actually yes for things, to agree to do things. So it's something to keep in mind. Has anyone ever felt like that? You say, oh, I just gotta learn how to say no. Anyone here? And I even read books about like how to say no. I'm on this committee, I'm on this board, I'm committing myself here, and I forgot, what do I like to do? I don't know, I just keep saying yes to everyone. You know? So over time, I kind of even learned even personally on my own on that. So one of the studies you see, askers assume, so they're really asking the askers. That's what's even more interesting about this influence work. So the people who are actually asking people to complete a questionnaire, they thought maybe to get 5 people to do the questionnaire, they had to ask probably around 20 people. So it turns out, however, an average shows 10 people are asked to complete 5 questionnaires. So again, we always kind of assume, a lot of times people assume that it's not going to, the results are going to be dramatically different or lower than they expected. But it turns out, surprisingly, that it was only 10 people instead of 20 at the end. Also, too, a reason why is a lot of times that naturally there's politeness with things. So we're more inclined to want to say yes, to want to help people, because we're not good people. So we have good intentions. So that always makes it kind of difficult as well. They had one, too, there was a study about cell phone, and that resulted very similar to as well. So more people actually allowed the person to randomly to use their cell phone that they asked than what the actual, I would say, asker would assumed at the beginning. So it's really interesting. So there's a higher value, more of yes, compared to what you see other notes. So another one too, and I really learned this from, of course, there's the book, but I always remember there was one VP at the college I worked at, and he would always say, when it deals with communication and how to enhance communication, And he said, I don't know why people are sending people emails, they send them back. He said, no, this is what you just have to do. Stop by, see them in person, talk to them, let them get to know you, ask questions. And odds are people are going to work with you more. And just even from here, they even have some studies that they did, is, for example, let's say dramatically from in-person to email a request that's done. In person, there's 34 times more likely a person to agree if it's in person compared to email. So that's something to really think about, because if it's something you truly want to do or see about something you're passionate about, and you really want other people to be involved, in person is going to be the most effective way to be able to do that. So it's always something to really think about. So when it deals with certain conversations, even personally I think about, I always think, okay, do I want it over email? Then you get an email back and forth, and it's almost like touche sometimes. You ever have that at work or something? You're like, touche, I documented more than you. But then it kind of takes away that personal feel. So when you have this, in person is so much more effective on getting that kind of yes or agreement, consensus as well. So also another part too, I don't know, who's familiar with, this was years back, Stanley Milgram's experiment?
Is that what they gave other people? We're supposed to shock other people? Is that what you got?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that was quite surprising as well, because they had this study where it's kind of like a classroom. So there are people that are just doing a quiz. If they get the answer wrong, they get a shock. People aren't actually receiving the shock, but the participant who's looked at as more kind of the teacher or penalizing that's turning it up, in their mind, they think the person's getting shocked. They're in another room, they can hear screams, so therefore they're assuming the person's actually getting shocked. Okay? So no one was harmed in this as well. So they had that experiment, and then they had the person guiding them saying, okay, well they got it wrong, press the button shock. All right, next, okay, that's the question, got it wrong. Okay, we're going to turn it up, we're going to do a shock. So the person hears the screams. The person, some of them may visibly feel like, oh gosh, what am I doing? It's wrong. Or some may even question, but they still may end up doing it. So if it's in person, when the person's right there, guiding that person to turn the down, press the button, 65% you're looking at that's kind of agreeing those things. However, when it's turned, as an example, when it's turned to the phone, you look at 20% effectiveness as well. So that's something to think about. That also supports that in-person versus even phone at that time. I think that was more prior to email, probably when email was only a part of ARPANET at that time. So it's probably your phone and in person. So that's something else to think about. So it's a really push for the effectiveness of in-person on that. Also managers. This is a big part, and it really opened my eyes in things as well. Because for people who are managers, or if you're seeking to be managers, be aware of the power of influence that you do have. Because there could be a reasonable likeliness of the person just feeling pressured, not wanting to question and still answer. So as you see here, for example, illegal job interview questions. They tend to be answered by interviewees. They feel pressured, there's a worry about, wow, this person really has power over. This is my employment. I could get a job, who knows, money, food, water, shelter, things that they're going to need. There's a lot of pressure that's on there. So you see, one of the studies that she showed was 83% of interviewees felt obligated to answer illegal questions. So always keep that in mind, and keep in mind of one's power that they actually have. Because a lot of times we may have that small talk. For example, before the meetings it mentions that they're just saying, oh, how are you doing? Oh, this, oh, kids, baseball, and things like that. And they can actually tap into those questions that one should not ask during the interview process. So if anyone, manager, hiring, board of directors, hiring employees or things, it's something to think of because it could put people in an awkward position to not want to answer maybe, but they still do because they feel obligated because the power one has. So a lot of times people don't realize the influence they pick. So it doesn't mean you have to be paid manager, but again, it could be volunteer board of directors, hiring person, or things like that. So it's always something to truly keep in mind. Some examples too, I would say, of just kind of influence that one has. I would even go to my personal examples. And it caused me to really reflect on things and go, wait, what influence do I have? Like, how did I do it? Or do I have it? And then after looking for it, I thought, yeah, I guess there is. So for example, one was with the author too as well, Vanessa Bohns, and I would always geekily, nerdily, inquire with authors and talk to other people, correspond, or send a random email out, say, oh, I heard you on this, talk about what their content and ask questions. And there's one I actually said, I thought it was the coolest thing. I don't know, just one of my geeky things. And I met a person who was more of a president level of organization recently. And I was really impressed by that. And I was really impressed how humble also they were. And I realized the volume of power, that maybe they didn't realize the volume of power and influence that they do have. For example, these were allocating tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, all these things, the volume of funds. And then I thought, what can I get? I felt like that the conversation was so good that it's just that I had that connection with the person. So then I sent a message actually to the author here of the book. And I said, I was thinking, I'm going to buy a book. If it's possible that I could mail it to you, and if you could personalize it or just sign it for this person. And then she actually said, what would you like to say? I got a book right here. I'll send it to you. And a couple of days later, I received the book, and it was just personalized to this person. It showed how much influence you think, and it was personalized from the author. And I didn't even pay for it or anything. I was just so it's almost tears in my eyes. It's oh my goodness, this is so cool. But that's kind of the influence that people can have just from an ask. So another time too, let's see here. One was actually earlier this week. And earlier this week we had, I was thinking, what should I get? I always like to have some kind of handout. So I thought, I have to have something with a pen. All right. So what kind of pen? What's the best pen here, do you think, in the area? Is there any specific company that comes to mind? Oh, really? What about a banking pen or a credit union pen? There you go. Instantly it came to mind. It's the quality of those pens. It was a Chemung pen. I thought, I'm going to ask some banks to see if I could actually have some pens so I could give out there in the presentation. And I thought, all right, let's do it. How many will it take? I don't know. I was thinking, I'm going to get rejected. I'll go to one, another. Maybe I could get one pen here, two there. Worst come to worst, I'll just go take one from the thing. Each one, maybe. And actually, when I was there, I said, I'm going to stop by first and look it up too. And then I did. I was in conversation. And then I just asked. I said, I'm doing a presentation at the Steele Memorial Library, a book review. It's going to be my first one here. And I want to do a thing where just a little, maybe a slight activity, and maybe it'll include a pen. First pen that came to mind, just smoking up. Great pen. And then they actually said, how many do you need? I don't know. It could be maximum 40 people. She said, yeah, it's fine. And in my mind, I'm going, this is so cool. I'm actually applying the techniques I actually learned from the book, encourage myself just to ask the question, instead of have the other part of discouraging myself and saying, no, I should just go buy my own pens. The old kind of big pens or something. But I got the coolest pen, Chemung pens. Just from an ask. So that's one thing to think about. Even in that in life, it could be slight, but it could be things that are even larger. And it never hurts to ask. That's something else to think about. Another area too was when I was in, it was a Chemung Chamber of Commerce, Leadership Chemung. And we're in a group, this is maybe 2014-ish, 2015-ish. And we worked in different groups and had different projects. And one, the group I was in, with Jennifer and Ron and Greg and myself, we're coming up with different ideas. A lot of times people would do events or things like that, but it's just at that moment. So we said, we'll do something more. What about bench swings? So we connected with the Friends of the River at that time, with Jim Pfeiffer. And we did that, and then we ended up setting some bench swings up. So before we got to that point though, I was more like the financial, the fundraiser. I said, this is cool, I get to learn. But it was scary, how do I get money? I kept thinking, how do I receive support for something like this? And I talked to a person that works in the area of development. And they just said, go to companies, just ask. Just ask. Just ask for $5, $100? No, what do you need? Are you going to reason about? Just ask. And we did. It was virtually 100% of the organizations actually sent us donations for the Friends of the River to go through and to help have these installed and paid for. So successfully they're there. There's even 2 there over behind the town hall, Town of Elmira, West Elmira. But they have them back. They kind of flank that area where you go straight all the way down towards the river on each side. So they're even covered, the bench swings. It was just perfect. Another organization came in to help install, put them up, and it was just perfect. And that was one of those things where, and every time I walk by or other people, it's just that feeling of pride of, wow, all it is just from asking. So that kind of summed it up on that end, even from my own personal experience too. So, always remember, so with great power comes great responsibility. And that's one part. Everyone has a level of power, no matter which position that you are in life. Whether you're one of the best English teachers that I ever had, is down home, okay, or in any other position as well. So always keep that part in mind. So some basic tips and advice too. So in person, always keep in mind, that's going to be the most effective. Okay, you have in person, you have email. Even in person is more effective too than Zoom as well. So sometimes people may say, oh, I see them, I can hear them, you can see their expressions. But actually, in person still is even more effective than that. Another part, make a simple ask. Initially, before, even myself, I would say, oh, if you want, if you could, if you don't mind, maybe we could do this. No, I would say go and ask. So if we're doing this for example, the interfaith field that we have, the hospitality center maybe, that they're part of. And then you may just ask the company and say, we're doing this. Would you be able to support us and donate this specific amount? So, and it's so much more helpful and clear. But prior in my life, yeah, I thought that was impossible. But that's actually what's even more effective. And people do want to support organizations. Also be present in the decision room. That's another part. For example, there was an example I was reading, and one was, there was a business organization and the decision room that they had. And fortunately, first it was primarily all male, but then once it was female that was also there, and even a person's presence opens one's eyes. So they're thinking about types of healthcare. And that really even caused even sway things of the conversation to open up about healthcare and even for women as well, to be part of the decision for the company and organization. So not only is it just even being there and speaking, how people always assume, but sometimes just even being present makes a dramatic difference as well. So something else to think about. Compliments and gratitude, it influences, it establishes rapport. People want to be validated, all those things. People want to know each other. Okay? There's always a connection with that. For saying no, make sure you take time to respond. How many people have challenges saying no? They feel like, oh, it's just hard, right? So that's one thing to think about. And just like how was mentioned before, in person, it's probably the hardest to say no in person. Or through the phone. And then also the other part, you have email. So if you're like, you kind of really want to know, or just give a no and it's too hard for you to say it in person, could you email that to me? So if you think of it on the other side to empower yourself to be able to say no, then you could even defer it all the way to kind of to that level as well. So, and also be aware of your other influence as well. One that kind of stood out too was 3 times more people see our social media than we assume. So a lot of things too to even think about. Even social media and what we do, especially when it deals with information that may not be true or things like that, that tends to spread more. So we also want to think of our influence like that because our actions has an effect, even digitally as well. So those are kind of some advice that we do have. So with that said too, I decided we have to have a gift. So what we did with this, so I included for everyone, I know they're not cards like from Oprah Winfrey or anything, but they're cards with a D. So we have those, so you could always, each person could take one with you, and it has the pen that was used that I was able to apply the influence I had on for all of you. So you could write a thank you, a letter of gratitude to a loved one, a friend, a person you haven't seen. So all I ask is if you could do that. So whomever it is, take time to think. You'll have time later on when you're leaving here or anything like that as well. So we have that, just a letter of gratitude. And lastly here, we do have an autograph book, autographed by the author. You have more influence than you think. And I know there's been a few people that came in, so feel free if you want to, how many people have not completed one of these? Feel free to put your name on there. And while we're doing this, what questions do you have for me too? Regarding the book?
I don't know if I have a question, but I have an observation. And I was speaking to a younger person who was thinking about going to school, and I said to them, did you check out any of the possible grants? And she says, no. She says, I'm afraid to go because I don't want to appear to be pushy or greedy. Much one to ask is normal. You know, it's not like you're doing anything that's not positive. So she went to the person who was in charge of the grants and she said, would you happen to have any information? She said, and she said, you qualify. And she actually got the money just by asking. But she was afraid to ask, or reluctant to ask, you know. So sometimes we don't want to be offensive.
Yeah.
Or we don't want to hear no. So you anticipate that they're going to say no, you know.
Yeah, we worry about the no. We're assuming the no is going to be just dramatically more
So
than what it tends to be.
to take that step. Donna also had an experience with just on phone, asking about pectin, and in the course of asking about how pectin works, the guy said, "Would you like to have some pectin?" She said, "Sure." So the person sent it by mail, and it was that step of just not being too cautious, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like an example done, you mentioned a couple examples of even having questions. You said about pectin, had questions, had questions about it, he sent some free samples to you. Or the person that was asking about financial aid, they took the step, once they asked, then it sounds like they had enough to even be able to pay for their schooling and help. So that's why I really want to implore all of you, is not only to do it for yourselves and encourage others, but, well, for yourselves, but also to encourage others to realize the volume of influence that they do have. And a lot of times it deals with those things. Ask in person, do those things. So, yes, pleasure.
And I might have missed it. What's an example of an illegal interview question?
Well, technically, my full disclosure is I am not a lawyer or HR representative. However, what it mentions within the book, though, is, the book actually asks, it shows, I think it was 83% of a person. Let's take a look here. There you go. So, especially for people in power, so you have that there. And for example, legal job interview questions going to be answered by the interviewee still, because they feel pressure to. So, some examples that they actually had, one they included is a person asked about family and kids and things like that, or even the small talk that happens right before the interview. And for people to realize the influence that they do have as hiring managers, that even though it appears to be average small talk to them, but it's very influential to the person being interviewed, the interviewee. So that's one thing to think about. So that was just one example, is the person asking about family and how are things, what do you do? And they assume it's just kind of like banter, but it has such a higher effect on other people as well. And especially their likeliness to answering, even though they may even be uncomfortable as well. So it's just really for awareness of people to recognize their power. You know?
Juan, when you ask,
Yes.
when you use the word, illegal questions, illegal, there are some questions that you're not allowed to ask somebody who's come for a job. For instance,
Right.
where do you go to church? Or are you a Republican or Democrat? You know, those are not permitted. Or doing their whole bunch. Is that the kind of illegal?
Yeah, you can refer to those as well. Because that small talk banter that happens before, the person still feels that they're obligated virtually to answer. Even though it's small talk, they kind of know, but there's that incentive of, I want to be employed, I want a job, or maybe I want a better job. And will this, me kind of make, who knows, making a statement of the person making a statement that, I prefer not to answer that. They may fear that it's going to rule them out of being hired on that end. So it's just for awareness for people that are even in the positions of power to even recognize those things, even in that area when it deals with the field of hiring. But everyone still, again, has all different levels of influence on things. So everyone, even in this room. So I know we have everyone that put it in as well. Did everyone complete it? Alrighty, so should I randomly pick someone? I know, since you're up front, I know. Wait, I probably should, get my teacher back from Ernie Davis, probably having to call at me. So, the person at the front, so this is Helmut. Would you like to draw?
Sure. Okay.
Alrighty. Let's see who is the winner. Now,
Oh, no, we can't do that.
John Helmut.
No.
I think we're going to go for another one. All right.
All right.
Here we go. What are the odds
I could
of
not
that?
see it.
Vic.
I want you to know.
All right, if this is your name again, you're going to have to see the principal.
Yes.
Donna Hoff. So you do win the autographed book by Vanessa Bohns.
I have more influence than I know.
You do. And she has,
Did you actually
Says,
contact her?
to the influence you have every day, Vanessa Bohns.
Oh,
Yes, so everyone, thank you for participating. Thank you, Steele Memorial Library, Chemung County Library District, and especially the friends of the CCLD and everyone who has attended here. So thank you, I really appreciate it.